My name is Vanessa Jameson, and for years, I lived in a marriage where my voice was the quietest one in the room. I thought love meant endurance, thought silence meant peace. But when my husband let his mother march into our brand new home with 6 grandchildren and laughed as she told me to leave if I didn't like it, something inside me broke. This isn't just a story about a mother-in-law or a husband who never grew up. This is the story of how I walked out of a life built on someone else's rules and finally chose myself. Tonight, I want to take you inside that journey, not with anger, but with the kind of honesty that changes the way you see your own reflection in the mirror. They say marriages are built on compromise, but mine had always felt like a negotiation I never agreed to. I thought moving into the new house in Golden would change things, give me breathing room. For weeks I believed in that fantasy, the mountain air, the sunlight that poured through the wide windows, the illusion that my marriage could find fresh ground. But peace doesn't last when you're tethered to a man who has never cut the cord with his mother. It started on a Saturday morning. I was still vacuuming the cream-colored rug in the living room when the doorbell rang. 10 o'clock sharp. I wasn't expecting anyone. And then, like a tidal wave, 6 children burst past me, muddy sneakers, sticky fingers, voices too loud for walls that were barely broken in. Behind them came Darlene, my mother-in-law, dragging backpacks and wearing the self-satisfied smile of someone who thinks chaos is a gift. "Vanessa, sweetie, the place looks adorable," she said, without even glancing at the fact that my Dyson was still humming in my hands. "I brought the little ones. They're so excited. Just fix them a quick lunch and have the bathtub ready afterward. They got into mud at the park." Her voice wasn't a request. It was a decree. I froze, words lodged in my throat. "I didn't plan for guests today," I managed, trying to keep my tone civil. She chuckled, waving it off like I was being dramatic. "Relax. You're such a planner. You'll adjust." Shoes scuffed across the hardwood. Curtains yanked. A crash echoed from the dining room. My heart pounded in sync with each sound of destruction. Then Tyler appeared at the top of the stairs, smoothie in hand, grinning like this was all some sitcom. "Hey, everyone made it," he said, and then, looking at me, added the sentence that would split something open inside me. "Babe, if it's too much, you can just, I don't know, step outside or something?" Darlene smirked beside him, her arms crossed like a queen watching her soldiers do her bidding. "Yeah, Vanessa, if you don't like it, leave." And then they laughed. My husband and his mother laughed in my face as their grandkids smeared chocolate handprints down the hallway wall. It was more than humiliation. It was erasure. I'd swallowed Darlene's intrusions for years. Her mom says advice about onions, her vinegar lectures about floors, her constant unannounced visits. I had endured Christmases where I played chef and maid to a family that wasn't mine, while my own parents spent the holiday alone hundreds of miles away. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was strong enough to manage it. But strength without boundaries isn't resilience, it's surrender. Standing in that ruined living room, something inside me cracked. A quiet, decisive break. I turned off the vacuum, set it aside, and walked upstairs without a word. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and pulled out a suitcase. My movements were calm, almost too calm, like I'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. Clothes folded, laptop packed, planner, toothbrush, medication. Every item was a declaration. I'm leaving. When Tyler finally noticed, I was zipping the bag closed. "Hey, what's going on?" His face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief, as if he couldn't fathom that I might actually follow through. "You told me to leave," I said evenly. He scoffed, stepping closer. "You're seriously doing this? You're overreacting." "No," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm finally reacting." Darlene appeared in the doorway then, her hands on her hips, her tone patronizing. "Vanessa, let's not make a scene. Be reasonable." I looked straight at her. "You brought 6 kids into my home uninvited and told me to clean up after them. This is the scene. I'm just walking out of it." And with that, I carried my suitcase down the stairs, past the smeared walls and broken curtain rod, past the sound of Tyler calling my name. I walked out the front door. No one laughed this time. I thought I might cry as the gravel crunched beneath my tires, but there were no tears, just silence. Not relief, not panic, silence. A silence so heavy it felt like freedom. What I didn't know then was that silence would become the beginning of a new language for me, a language that meant choosing myself over expectations, peace over performance. And for the first time in years, I listened. The first night away from my home didn't feel like liberation. It felt like drifting. I checked into a business-class hotel off the interstate, one of those sterile places designed for traveling sales reps and families in between destinations. Beige walls, a bedspread patterned with squares, a desk bolted to the wall. Nothing personal, nothing mine. And yet, for the first time in years, the air didn't carry Darlene's voice or Tyler's dismissive sigh. I ordered a salad I didn't eat and stared at the TV without really watching. My mind was too loud. It replayed every scene, her laughter, his shrug, the crash of something breaking in the dining room. But under the noise was something else. Stillness. The kind of stillness you don't notice until everything else stops. That night, fully clothed, I fell asleep on top of the covers. My dreams were jagged, but morning came anyway, pouring light through the thin curtains. And when it did, I knew what I had to do. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact list. It had been months since I called my parents, years since I spent real time with them. My holidays had been consumed by obligations to Tyler's family. My birthdays had been blurred by Darlene's traditions. My parents had become voices on Zoom, faces on screens, postcards of a life I once knew. But that morning, I called. Mom answered on the second ring. "Vanessa?" Her voice cracked with that motherly intuition, the kind that knows before you speak. I didn't have the words at first. Just a breath. Then finally, "Can I come home for a while?" She didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said, soft and certain, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. 2 days later, I stepped off the train in Portland. The platform was damp with mist, the air heavy with pine. My father stood at the end, arms folded across his chest the same way he had when he picked me up from college. My mother clutched her purse in one hand and a travel mug of peppermint tea in the other. When she saw me, she didn't wave. She ran. Her hug was too long, too tight, and exactly what I needed. My father, stoic as ever, simply rested his hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Let's go home." Back at their house, everything felt both smaller and safer than I remembered. The kitchen island where I once did homework was cluttered with recipe books and half-burned candles. My father busied himself rearranging chairs that didn't need moving, clattering around the toaster until a plate of buttered toast appeared in front of me. My mother draped a blanket across my lap, though the room was warm. These gestures weren't about necessity. They were about anchoring me back into a life where I mattered. And for the first time in years, I let myself be anchored. Later that night, wrapped in one of my mom's oversized sweatshirts, I began to talk. Not all at once, in bursts, about the unannounced visits, the ruined holidays, the loneliness of lying next to a man who never saw me because he was too busy listening to his mother, about how my parents had become strangers while I played hostess to cousins who didn't even know my birthday. By the end, I whispered it out loud for the first time. I'm divorcing him. There was no gasp, no judgment. My mother simply squeezed my hand until our knuckles whitened. My father nodded once and asked, "Do you need a lawyer?" The simplicity of his question nearly undid me. Not, "Are you sure?" Not, "Can you fix this?" Just, "What do you need?" I nodded. It struck me then, in that quiet kitchen, that this was what support looked like. Not interference, not obligation, just presence. And maybe that's why so many women in my position never leave. Because we forget what true presence feels like. We confuse endurance with loyalty, silence with peace. A recent study showed that nearly 65% of married women in the U.S. admit to leaning on their parents emotionally or financially even years after marriage. That statistic used to baffle me. Now it felt like survival. Marriage might tie you legally, but family, the kind that shows up without conditions, keeps you alive. In the days that followed, I let myself exhale. My father left job listings on my pillow, printed from the library bulletin board like I was back in college. My mother filled the fridge with foods she remembered I loved 10 years ago: cherry yogurt, almond butter, dark chocolate pretzels. Their house became a cocoon, wrapping me in the parts of myself I thought I'd lost. I wasn't healed, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I was no longer breaking. And that, I realized, was the beginning of freedom. The decision to divorce wasn't a single moment. It was an accumulation. Years of swallowed frustration, of being told to adjust, of letting my own life dissolve into someone else's. By the time I said the words to my parents, I had already been preparing for it without realizing. The next step was finding someone who could translate my pain into something the court would recognize. That's how I met Dana. She came recommended by an old college friend who'd been through her own messy separation. When I walked into Dana's office, I expected cold professionalism, maybe even judgment. Instead, I found a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, a voice like gravel, and the kind of presence that made you sit up straighter without realizing it. "Tell me everything," she said, sliding a yellow legal pad across the desk. So I did. At first, haltingly, then in a rush. About Darlene's constant intrusions, Tyler's refusal to set boundaries, the way every holiday and milestone became hers to script. Dana didn't interrupt. She just wrote, occasionally nodding, occasionally tilting her head like a doctor listening to a difficult diagnosis. When I finally stopped, she leaned back. "We'll need documentation." That was the one thing I had. Maybe some part of me always knew it would come to this, because I had kept everything. Screenshots of Darlene's texts, lists of groceries, instructions for how to wash sheets, because the children have sensitive skin, reminders to have meals prepped before they arrived. Even a voice memo from Thanksgiving where Tyler hissed at me to just shut up and do what Mom says. Dana raised her eyebrows as she scanned the evidence. "This isn't just emotional abuse," she said. "It's provable interference. That's rare." "It will hold." For the first time in years, I felt something close to power. But power is fragile when you've lived in someone else's shadow for too long. A few mornings later, my phone rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. After 4 days of silence, why should I? But it kept ringing, again and again, until I finally picked up. "Vanessa." His voice was frantic, ragged. "You have to come back. Please. It's a disaster." I didn't respond. "The kids," he rushed on. "They trashed the house. Crayon all over the walls, juice stains on the rugs." Darlene tried to bathe them and slipped. "She's fine, I think, but her hip, it's bruised. They broke the towel rack sword fighting with mops. I can't do this. You have to come back." His panic poured through the phone, but I felt nothing. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked flatly. "Because you left me in the middle of..." I cut him off. "I left you in the middle of what you let happen." There was silence on the other end. For once, he had no defense. "I didn't invite those kids," I continued. "I didn't hand our home over." I didn't laugh in my wife's face and tell her to leave. His voice dropped. "I'm sorry. I really am." I closed my eyes. "I'll come back," I said. Relief flooded his words. "You will?" "Yes, but only to get what I need. Your signature on the divorce papers." When I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. That surprised me, because for years, my body had been trained to shake in moments like this, to absorb his indifference, to prepare for the next storm. But now, there was only steadiness. Dana arranged everything. We would fly back to Colorado together. She insisted on it. "These things get messy," she said, her pen tapping against the desk. "Better you're not alone." On the flight, I stared out the window at the quilt of land below. I thought about the invisible labor I had carried, tasks no one acknowledged, but everyone relied on. Studies show women still perform nearly 2/3 of domestic labor, even in households where both partners work full-time. I was no exception. I was the cleaner, the cook, the social coordinator, the silent shock absorber for every decision Tyler didn't want to make. And the worst part? I had convinced myself it was love, that to sacrifice was to be a good wife, that silence was strength. But silence had cost me years, And now, I wasn't willing to give it another minute. When the plane touched down, I knew exactly what I wanted. Not revenge, not even closure, just freedom. And this time, I wouldn't settle for less. The house looked different when I returned. Maybe it was because I had seen what life could feel like without it. Maybe it was because the chaos still lingered in the walls. When Dana and I pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened, but not from fear. From certainty. Darlene opened the door before we even knocked. She wore a stiff white neck brace, the kind people get after a minor fall, but wear like a crown. "Oh, honey," she cooed, as if I were an old friend she hadn't seen since book club. "It's been a madhouse without you." "I'm so glad you came to your senses." I didn't answer. Tyler appeared behind her, and I hardly recognized him. Not because he had changed physically, but because something in him had deflated. His posture was slouched, his voice lower, his eyes darting like a boy who'd been caught cheating on a test. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where Darlene once handed me a clipboard filled with Thanksgiving menu assignments, like I was her unpaid caterer. Only this time, Dana sat beside me, sharp, cool, immovable. I slid the papers across the table. "Divorce," I said simply. Tyler's fingers twitched against the wood grain. "You're really doing this?" "I am." His voice cracked. "I thought we were working through it. You didn't even give me a chance to change." I looked at him, then around the room. The walls still bore faint crayon marks. The rug was stained. The curtain rod was gone. The house itself testified louder than I ever could. "You told me to leave," I said. "I didn't mean it." "You said it more than once." He turned to Darlene for backup, like he always had. But for the first time, she had no script. She stared back at him, lips pressed tight, the weight of her control collapsing under its own mess. I stood. "I'll need 30 minutes to gather my things. After that, I'll be at a hotel. Then Portland." Dana's presence was like armor. Tyler didn't argue. He only nodded, small and defeated. 30 minutes later, I walked out with 2 suitcases and a box of files. Dana followed me to the car. She didn't say much, just placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "You did well." In the hotel that night, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't replay every fight in my head the way I used to. Instead, I opened my laptop to find an email from Tyler. One line. I signed them. Attached were the scanned divorce forms, his shaky signature sprawled at the bottom. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed 2 sentences. "Thank you. I wish you peace." And for the first time in years, I slept. Not the restless kind of sleep, filled with dreams of what-ifs and compromises, but the heavy, deep sleep of someone who has finally put down a burden too heavy to carry. In that silence, I realized something. Silence isn't defeat. It isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the strongest declaration you can make. It says, "I will not perform for you anymore. I will not beg to be heard. I will not argue in circles with someone who never intended to listen." Silence, I discovered, can be the purest form of self-respect. Back in Portland, life didn't rebuild overnight. It didn't need to. It unfolded slowly, like a flower that had been waiting too long for sunlight. My parents' guest room became my sanctuary, the walls lined with the small comforts of home. My mom stocked the fridge with cherry yogurt, almond butter, and the dark chocolate pretzels she remembered I loved a decade ago. My dad printed out job listings from the library and left them neatly on my pillow, like I was a college kid again. At first, I only smiled politely. But then, I actually read one. It was for a boutique marketing agency downtown. Creative lead, part-time, specializing in eco-startups and local nonprofits. It had been years since I'd touched design work, but I dusted off my old portfolio, added the freelance projects I'd quietly done on the side, and sent it off on a whim. To my surprise, they emailed back that same afternoon. The creative director wanted to interview me the next day. I wore jeans and a blazer that hadn't seen daylight since before COVID. Sitting across from the director, I felt something stir inside me. A confidence I thought I'd buried under years of compromise. I spoke about strategy, branding, storytelling, things that once lit me up. And as I spoke, I realized I wasn't just qualified. I was good. Damn good. They hired me. That job gave me something Tyler never could, my identity back. I wasn't someone's unpaid housekeeper. I wasn't a stand-in mother for his family's children. I wasn't the woman apologizing for Darlene's opinions at every dinner table. I was Vanessa Jameson again. Yes, I even reclaimed my maiden name. And I was proud of it. I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment not far from my parents. Big windows, a balcony just large enough for a chair and a potted plant. I painted one wall deep green and filled the shelves with books I chose, not self-help guides about managing your mother-in-law. On Saturday mornings, I brewed coffee and walked to the farmer's market. For the first time in years, I wasn't rebuilding. I was beginning. As for Tyler, I didn't ask, but word found me anyway. A mutual friend called one day, her voice careful. "He's not the same," she said. Withdrawn. He quit his job a few weeks after the divorce. Moved back in with Darlene. I almost laughed at the irony. For all his loyalty to her, the family had grown tired of Darlene's control. The cousins stopped visiting. The grandkids weren't paraded through her condo anymore. The empire she built on manipulation had crumbled, leaving only the son who never learned to stand on his own. Months later, I received a package in the mail. No return address, just a box with a note. "Thought you might want this. Sorry it took me so long to understand." Inside was our wedding photo. The one Darlene had insisted we frame in the foyer, proof of our perfect marriage. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid the photo from the frame and burned it in a small ceramic bowl on my balcony. The smoke curled upward, fragile and freeing, like the memory itself was evaporating into the night sky. On the 1-year anniversary of my leaving, I invited my parents to dinner at my apartment. I made spinach ravioli from scratch, lit candles in recycled wine bottles. My mom brought dessert. My dad carried in 3 mismatched cloth napkins he swore were better than paper ones. We laughed. We argued about politics. We talked about travel plans. We were a family again, whole, unfiltered, present. That night, my dad hugged me longer than usual and said, You did the hard thing, kid. Most people stay. You didn't, my mom added softly. You finally started living your life on your terms. That's all we ever wanted for you. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. The divorce, the escape, walking out of that house. My answer is always the same. I regret how long I waited. I regret every holiday I spent serving strangers while my parents sat alone. I regret the years I spent shrinking myself, trying to be easy, tolerable, palatable for people who never cared to see me. But I don't regret leaving. I don't regret the silence. I don't regret choosing myself. Because in the end, the bravest words I ever spoke weren't shouted in anger. They were whispered to myself as I turned that doorknob. This time, I choose me. And for the first time in my life, I finally meant it. And that's how I reclaimed my life, step by step, choice by choice, until I finally remembered who I was before I ever became somebody's wife, somebody's daughter-in-law, somebody's shadow. If my story resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we share true-to-life stories that remind us what strength, dignity, and love really mean. Take care of yourself. Treasure the people who see you for who you are. And until we meet again, I wish you peace, health, and the courage to always choose yourself. Mota. Vanessa Jameson thought her marriage was built on compromise, but over the years, it became clear she was the only one sacrificing. For over a decade, she endured a husband who never grew out of being his mother's son, and a mother-in-law who barged into their home with keys of her own, dictating everything from holiday dinners to how the floor should be cleaned. Every Christmas was stolen, every boundary ignored, until Vanessa's life no longer felt like hers. The breaking point came in their brand new home, a place Vanessa believed would be a fresh start. Instead, her mother-in-law stormed in with 6 unruly grandchildren, turning the pristine house into chaos. When Vanessa protested, she was mocked and told to leave by both her husband and his mother. For the first time, she listened. Calmly, she packed a suitcase and walked out, not with rage, but with the kind of stillness that comes from finally knowing your worth. In a lonely hotel room, she made a call she hadn't dared to make in years, to her parents. Their embrace at the Portland train station reminded her what unconditional love felt like. With their quiet support, she found the strength to say the words out loud. I'm divorcing him. With the help of Dana, a sharp attorney, Vanessa gathered years of evidence of her husband's neglect and his mother's control. Even when Tyler begged her to return after the children destroyed the house, she stood firm. She went back only for one thing, his signature on the divorce papers. Freedom wasn't immediate, but step by step, it became real. Vanessa found work again, reclaimed her maiden name, and moved into an apartment of her own. On her balcony at sunset, she burned her wedding photo, watching the smoke curl into the sky like the last trace of a life she no longer belonged to. Her story isn't about bitterness. It's about rebirth. It's about realizing silence can be strength, that leaving isn't weakness, and that sometimes the bravest words you can say are simple. This time, I choose me.